The farmer dug up a metal sphere from his kitchen garden. He rang the police. Vikram Pratap Soren pressed the spade into the earth with measured strokes, exactly as his grandfather had taught him long ago, unhurried, so his back would not start to ache. He had decided to lay the foundation for a shed by himself. The April sun warmed the nape of his neck. The soil yielded easily. He had been digging into the third hour when the spade chimed against metal. He squatted, scooped the dirt aside with his hands. From the black loam, a rusty rim appeared. The shape was rounded. Peculiar. He trenched around it. Prized with a crowbar. No give. He had to broaden the pit and work the lever again. After about 20 minutes, he heaved the find out. An iron sphere the size of a watermelon. Rust furred all over. Vikram tried to lift it roughly 20 kilograms. He guessed. A welded seam ran along its equator, pitted by corrosion. No markings at all. Just a sphere made of two halves. Buried who knew when. He had bought this plot 5 years ago from Shamlal Iyer. Before that, the land had belonged to that family for about 30 years. Who had buried the ball was unclear. Amina. Perhaps Vikram had served in counterinsurgency in Jammu and Kashmir. He knew a little about munitions. The form was wrong. The seam looked makeshift. He dragged it to the handcart and trundled it into the courtyard. His wife Leela glanced out, swept her eyes over the object, asked nothing. She was used to her husband bringing up bits of metal from the ground. In the workshop, he set the sphere on the bench, fetched the angle grinder, put on his goggles, switched on the tool. The disc whined. He brought it to the seam. Ah. Sparks fanned out. The metal screeched, yet yielded. He cut carefully along the seam. After 20 minutes, he had circled it completely, switched off the grinder, took a chisel, tapped it with the hammer. The sphere split. Inside lay dense packing old rags, oily and musty, with damp. Vikram unpacked them layer by layer. Beneath the cloth was a cellophane pouch tied with thread. He untied it and peered in. Stones, many small stones, about the size of beans, yet transparent. He remembered a program about diamonds. They scratch glass and do not get scratched themselves. His heartbeat quickened. He poured the stones into a pouch and weighed them by feel. Around 300 grams, perhaps more. If they were diamonds, the price would be enormous, worth more than the farm itself. How had such a thing ended up in his kitchen garden? And did anyone else know about this stash? Covered it with the halves, stepped out, and locked the workshop. The yard was quiet. Hens milled near the shed. Leela was preparing lunch. Ananya was at school. It looked like an ordinary day, but a plan had begun to form in his head. He needed to verify the stones properly, understand where they came from, and move quietly until no one else caught wind of it. That evening, once the family had slept, he took his phone, scrolled through his contacts, and found a number: Suresh Chauhan, a fellow comrade from the Valley days, now an STF officer in Nagpur. He dialed, then reconsidered. He cut the call. First check with a jeweler. Go to the city tomorrow. Decide after that. He carried the sphere to the bathhouse, hid it beneath a floorboard in the corner, slid a plank back, placed a couple of buckets on top, returned, and lay down. Leila slept. Vikram stared at the ceiling, listening. Wind in the poplars, a dog barking, usual sounds. Yet inside him a tremor like he had opened a door onto danger. In the morning he drove to the Tehsil headquarters. He told his wife he needed spare parts. He took 3 stones in a little box. In town he found a jewelry workshop. He went in. Behind the counter a bespectacled man soldered under a lamp. Vikram placed the small box down and opened it. The jeweler lifted his gaze, grew cautious, took a stone and a loop, and studied it for a long while. Then the second, then the third. He set the loop aside. Diamonds clean. Technical grade, he said. At least 1 crore rupees. Vikram reclaimed the stones, stepped out, leaned against the wall, and drew a deep breath. So they were diamonds. Therefore, they had surely been stolen once. He got into his vehicle and drove home. He thought of the 90s gangs. Akache. Someone had buried it and then gone to prison or died. He entered Chandpur by lunchtime. Near the shop stood a black Toyota. Were they watching? He did not believe in coincidences. In the evening, he checked the locks. Sheru, by the kennel, was tense, staring toward the garden. Vikram picked up a torch and went to the side gate. Fresh footprints, 2 men had stood there for long. By his eye. Sneaker sizes 43 and 45. They had been peering over the fence at something. He went back and bolted the door. Leela, go to bed, he said. He would stay in the kitchen. It was time to call Suresh. If they were tailing him, they would soon try to take the stash. People like that did not leave witnesses. Head eyelid. Suresh answered in a gravelly voice. Vikram told him the sphere. The diamonds. The surveillance. APOWs. Suresh spoke. Dangerous. Men get killed over diamonds. Move the family to the city. You stay back at home with a weapon. Suresh added, I will move out the day after tomorrow. By lunchtime, I will be there. Hold for 2 days. Vikram ended the call, took out his shotgun, checked the cartridges, slid buckshot under the bed, lay down, slept poorly, woke at every rustle, and only nodded off toward dawn. In the morning, Leela did not believe him when Vikram said they had to get ready to go to her mother's. She looked at him in puzzlement. There is plenty of work, the garden, the hens, the cow, she said. Vikram insisted. He said mother had called. Ananya could miss school. A note would be arranged. Within an hour, they set off. Vikram drove carefully, checked his mirrors. No Toyota. He took them to Nagpur in about 2.5 hours. Saw them up to the 9th floor to his mother-in-law's flat. The mother-in-law was delighted. Pulled the family into the kitchen. Vikram lingered a moment and told his wife, I will slip back quietly in 3 days. Keep the phone by you. He drove back after dark. The road was empty. Only a few sparse headlights. He turned the radio on. Then off. He thought about the diamonds. About the one who had buried them. The plot had been Shyamlal Iyer's since the 70s, so the cash must have been buried later either by Shyamlal or without his knowledge. He reached the village around 10 at night. The streets were dark. Only the shop's lights burned. He turned into his lane and slowed. At the side gate, a Toyota, headlamps off, engine idling. The Toyota stood motionless for about 20 minutes, then started and crawled away. Vikram watched the red taillights fade and exhaled. The next day passed in taut waiting. He fed the cattle as usual, mended the leaning fence by the shed, yet kept listening, glancing about. The black car did not show again near the shop. By evening, Suresh phoned to say he would move out early the next morning. Reached by midday, he told Vikram to hold firm and open the door to no one. The night he spent almost without sleep, sat in the kitchen in the dark, gun across his knees, listening to the sounds of the lane. Around 3, he heard the side gate from the garden creak softly. He went to the window and risked a quick look from the side. Shadows moved in the yard. 2 dark figures crept toward the shed. Ben low. Vikram shoved the window wide, thrust both barrels out, and shouted, Stand where you are. I am armed. The figures froze for a second, then wheeled and ran for the fence at a fast trot. Vikram fired 1 barrel into the air. The blast split the night. Echo rolled over the sleeping village. The figures cleared the fence neatly. There was the crackle of breaking bushes, and then silence. Vikram reloaded a fresh shell, stepped into the yard. Tracks led to the side gate. On the wet earth lay a crowbar. They had likely planned to break the locks on the shed or the workshop. He picked up the heavy crowbar, returned inside, and rang the police station on the landline. Explained to the duty officer that there had been an attempted trespass and that he had fired in the air to scare off the intruders. Sub-Inspector Shamlal Nikhadi arrived after about 40 minutes in a Mahindra Bolero patrol vehicle, inspected the yard with a torch, took down a detailed statement in his notebook, and said they would increase patrolling and drive by more often at night. In the morning, Suresh Chauhan arrived, climbing out of an old green Mahindra Bolero. Only Vikram knew that under the sweatshirt sat a holster with a standard 9mm sidearm. And in the sports bag on the back seat lay something heavier than a pistol. They embraced hard, like brothers, clapping each other on the back, and crossed the yard to the bathhouse. Vikram lifted the floorboard in the far corner and took out the iron sphere. Suresh opened the two halves, spilled the diamonds into his broad palm, turned them in the daylight from the small window, whistled softly, shook his head. These are clean stones of high quality. Vikram, technical diamonds for industry, worth at least $5 million, perhaps more if sold wisely. In the 90s, people stole such stuff from defense factories in whole lots and then sold it off through middlemen. He said, someone buried a reliable cache and never got a chance to retrieve it, either went to prison for long or was killed in a gang fight. Now someone has learnt of the place. An old accomplice must have come back to claim it after so many years. Vikram recounted in detail the constant tailing over the last days and the night attempt with the crowbar. Suresh listened intently, nodding with understanding. When Vikram finished, Suresh took out his phone, dialed, spoke briefly to someone, ended the call, and looked at Vikram. Grave. I have called my men. The team will move out early tomorrow morning and be here by evening. 6 operators, full kit body armor, weapons. We too must hold for one day. I think they will try to take the stash tonight, he added. More serious and organized this time. They have at least 4 or 5 men. Let us ready the house for defense. Not much time. Suresh prepared the place methodically for a possible assault. From the sports bag, he drew a folding stock Kalashnikov from the 100 series, 3 magazines of 30 rounds, and 2 body armor vests of second-level protection. He showed Vikram how to put the vest on correctly and adjust the straps to fit. Then together, they checked every window and fastened them. Suresh sketched a plan of the yard on paper, marked likely avenues of approach, and explained that if the attackers went for a serious breach, Vikram would take position here at the kitchen window with the shotgun field of fire, the right side of the yard and the side gate. Suresh would take position in the bedroom with the rifle field of fire, the left side, and the garden. Crossfire to cover each other. Above all, do not panic. Shoot aimed. Do not waste rounds. The day passed in excruciating suspense. They cooked extra food, boiled water in metal cans, checked the weapons repeatedly. Vikram called his wife in Nagpur and said all was fine. Work on the homestead would soon be done, and he would come to take them back. Leela heard something off in his voice, yet did not press him. She trusted her husband. By evening, Suresh rigged a homemade alarm in the yard, a thin fishing line stretched between trees, tied to tin cans with pebbles inside. If anyone brushed the line at night, the cans would rattle. Primitive warning, but unfailing. Darkness fell quickly. Suresh switched the lights off in the house entirely and drew the curtains tight. They sat in the kitchen in the dark, sipped cold tea from a flask, and spoke in whispers. Suresh told of his service with the STF, of operations in Dar and Mandala, and the Old Valley memories. Vikram listened and remembered Jammu and Kashmir, the same mountains, the same fear of the unknown. Around 11, Shiru began a low growl by the kennel. Suresh raised a hand, quiet. They listened. Careful steps outside the fence. Several persons, then a minute of silence. After that, the sound of an engine somewhere far, approaching with a dull hum. Vikram and Suresh took positions. Vikram at the kitchen window, Suresh in the bedroom, and waited. The engine died somewhere near the bend in the lane. Silence. Then a twang, someone had snagged the line. The cans clattered. Suresh whispered in the dark. He pushed the muzzle of the rifle to the slit and sent a short burst into the air, 3 rounds. The report was deafening. The attackers flattened to the ground at once and began to return fire. Automatic pistols. Short bursts. Bullets cracked against the shutters and thudded into wood. One punched through the pane and buried itself in the opposite wall. Vikram fired the shotgun deliberately. He saw the flash of their shots and aimed at those points. Buckshot spread wide. Someone cried out in pain. The exchange lasted about 5 intense minutes. Then the attackers began to pull back, covering each other with fire. Suresh fired short bursts. Careful with ammunition, Vikram reloaded and sent another round. The attackers scrambled over the fence. An engine yelled, and the vehicle sped away. Silence returned, except for the ringing in their ears. Suresh would not allow a check of the yard. Immediately there could be a trap. They sat another hour in the dark, listening. Nothing. Then Suresh edged out through the back door, circled the yard with a torch, and came back to report. 1 wounded, blood by the fence, but they carried him off. He said, 9mm casings, automatic pistol. Serious people. Vikram phoned the sub-inspector and reported the attack. Shamlal Nikade arrived with 2 constables, inspected the place, and collected the spent casings into a bag. Vikram showed the holes in the shutters and the bullet in the wall. The officer shook his head. You must file a formal complaint. We will open a case. Vikram nodded. He would write it tomorrow. The rest of the night, they did not sleep, sat in the kitchen with the weapons close by. A gray dawn seeped in slowly. A fine drizzle began. Suresh made strong coffee, poured it into cups. They drank in silence. Vikram felt fatigue. Vikram, 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 Vikram. But the adrenaline still surged inside. Toward midday, Suresh called his men to confirm arrival time. By about 3, the drizzle thickened into a downpour. Visibility dropped just a gray sheet of water. Around 4, Suresh stiffened and signaled to Vikram, look. A black Toyota rolled slowly down the lane. The same one stopped around the corner with its engine running. Waited about 10 minutes, then drove off. Recon, Suresh muttered. They are preparing a second. More organized, go. But our team will arrive before that. We will make it. Right at 6 in the evening, 2 vehicles pulled up outside the house. A Mahindra Bolero and a Force Trax cruiser, both dark green and unmarked. 6 men in civilian clothes, sports jackets. Jeans climbed out. Yet Vikram recognized the military bearing at once. Suresh met them at the gate and exchanged a few brief words with the team leader. Commander Akshay, a tall, broad-shouldered man in his early 40s with a mustache. The operators quickly unloaded the gear body armor, helmets, rifles, crates of ammunition, a radio set, night vision devices. They carried everything inside and laid it out on the kitchen table. Akshay spread a local map. Suresh showed the house and the likely approaches. Akshay nodded, making pencil notes. An experienced commander. Vikram had seen such men in the valley. They organized the defense professionally, 2 operators on the shed roof with an excellent view over the entire lane, 2 in the yard behind the concrete fence to cover the side gate and the left approach, and 2 more inside the house on the upper floor, facing the garden. Akshay coordinated over the radio. Suresh and Vikram stayed as reserve. By nightfall, everything was ready. The operators took positions and checked comms. Akshay installed 2 infrared cameras in the yard and routed the feed to a laptop. Now they could see everything in the dark, any movement. Technology had leapt forward in recent years. They waited till midnight. Quiet, only the rain drummed on the roof. Then figures emerged, many. Vikram counted 9 silhouettes on the laptop screen. They moved in coordination and split into 3 groups. Professionals, not street thugs. Akshay frowned and whispered to Suresh, a serious team. They have prepared well. The groups began to encircle the house from 3 sides. Moving, crouched, using the trees as cover. At about 50 meters they halted. One of them shouted loudly, "Soren, come out. Hand over the stones. We will part peacefully, otherwise we will burn the house to ashes." Akshay gave no reply, only signaled the men to hold fire. A minute of pause. Then one attacker raised his arm and flung something towards the shed. A bottle with a burning rag, the classic Molotov, arced through the air. One operator on the shed roof snatched it mid-flight and tossed it back. The bottle shattered at the attacker's feet and fire flared. They jerked away and started shooting. "Work," Akshay commanded. The team opened precise fire, short, economical bursts. The attackers dropped flat and fired back. But they clearly had not expected such resistance. Within a minute, someone shouted, "Fall back." They began to crawl towards the vehicles, covering each other. Akshay ordered no pursuit. Hold positions. The attackers reached their cars. It started up, turned, and sped off. On the ground, 2 remained, one motionless, the other groaning and clutching his leg. Akshay went out with 2 men and checked. The dead one, a man around 30, without documents. Presentatos. The wounded one, younger, around 25, a through and through in the thigh. Akshay tied a tourniquet and stopped the bleeding. They called the police and an ambulance. The units arrived in about 20 minutes. The wounded man was taken away under guard. The dead man was covered with tarpaulin. The forensic team worked till morning, photographing, collecting casings, questioning everyone. Vikram gave his statement. Then the senior officer, Colonel Inderjit Singh, spoke with Vikram. He explained that the diamonds would be seized as material evidence and a criminal case opened. The wounded man was already giving names. The gang leader was Vijay Cherka Chauresha, an old offender who had served 15 years for robbery, released 3 years ago, and had formed a new crew. The colonel asked how Vikram knew of the cash. Vikram explained he had dug it up by accident while preparing the foundation for a shed. The colonel nodded, noted it in his pad, and said Chauresha would be caught within days. He was now the main suspect. Vikram would receive a reward for assisting once the case closed. Vikram shrugged. He had not done it for money, but for his family. The next few days turned into a manhunt. Colonel Inderjit formed an operational group of 10 and activated street informants. Chauresha seemed to vanish, not appearing at known haunts. The wounded accomplice gave safe house addresses, but all were empty. Chauresha sensed danger and kept changing flats. Each night, Vikram remained at home under the protection of 2 operators from Akshay's team. Suresh returned to Nagpur for duty, but called every day to check on the situation. Leela and Ananya still stayed with the mother-in-law. Vikram told his wife that it would end soon. They only needed to endure. After 3 days, the colonel rang and asked Vikram to come to the district headquarters for an identification. Vikram arrived with 2 security men. In the investigator's office, they showed him photographs. 10 men of roughly the same age stood in a line. Vikram recognized 2 at once, the very fellows who had come to question his wife and later tried to buy the plot. He pointed them out silently. The investigator nodded. Their names were Gyanesh Lysode and Prakash Ribakar, deputies of Vijay Cherka Chauresha. Both carried prior convictions. Lysode had been detained the previous day in Amravati, while Ribakar remained at large. The colonel explained that the wounded accomplice, Anand Kewale, had begun to speak in detail. He had implicated Chauresha, described how the diamonds were hidden, and even indicated the approximate spot on Shamlal Iyer's old parcel in the village, beneath an aged apple tree. He could not give exact coordinates, only a landmark. At that time, Chauresha had been in a remand facility awaiting trial and could do nothing. He received 15 years and served almost the entire term. 3 years ago, he was released and resumed searching for the cache. He frequented the village, questioned the elders about Shamlal Iyer, and learnt that the land had been sold to Vikram Soren. He then began to tail Vikram, waiting for him to discover the stones on his own. It was far easier to seize something already unearthed than to dig an entire field at random. When Vikram traveled to consult a jeweler, someone local, let slip a few words to a friend, and the information reached Chauresha. He decided to move quickly before Vikram hid the diamonds in a safer place or surrendered them to the police. The colonel showed Vikram an organization chart of the gang. Chaurasia sat at the top. Beneath him were 8 men. Lysode and Ribakar acted as lieutenants. The rest were foot soldiers. 3 had been killed or wounded during the attack on the house. 3 had been arrested in different towns, in Northern in Blayeven, and 2 remained wanted along with Chauresha. The criminal database had worked efficiently. Photographs of all the participants hung on the corkboard in the operations room. A week later, an informant's tip came through. Chaurasia had been seen in Bandara, renting a room from an elderly woman in the private quarter. The operations team moved out at once, surrounded the house quietly, and blocked every exit in the night. At 5 in the morning they went in. Chauresha tried to resist, fired a shot from a pistol, and missed. The operators subdued him in under a minute and cuffed him. Inside the room, they found a pistol, cash, and forged identity papers under another name. He was brought to Nagpur and the interrogation began. At first, Chauresha denied everything and demanded a lawyer. Then the investigator put before him the statements of Kawale and the others already detained. Everyone had named Chauresha, recounting his plan and his orders to attack Vikram's home. Understanding that denial was useless, Chauresha gave up and narrated the entire story. The investigator wrote down every word while the camera recorded the session. Chauresha signed the protocol and sat there, crestfallen, realizing he would likely receive life imprisonment for organizing a criminal gang, for the killing during the assault, and for the attempted murder of Vikram and the men protecting him. That evening, the colonel telephoned Vikram to report the arrest. Vikram let out a long breath. The tension of the recent weeks eased at once. He thanked the colonel, who replied that this was their duty to protect citizens. He added that the diamonds had been formally seized and would be held as material evidence until trial. After judgment, they would pass to the state. Vikram would receive a reward for his assistance to the investigation, 2,50,000 rupees. Vikram drove to Nagpur to bring his family home. Leela met him at the door, embraced him tightly, and asked nothing. Ananya jumped with joy. Papa had come. They would go home. They packed. He said goodbye to the mother-in-law and traveled back in the evening. Vikram drove calmly and narrated the essentials to his wife. Leela listened quietly, resting her hand on his over the gear lever. She understood that he had protected the family and risked himself. No further explanation was necessary. The next month went into paperwork and investigative procedures. Vikram traveled several times to the district headquarters to give supplementary statements and to participate in face-to-face confrontations with detainees. Chauresha sat gloomy at every meeting and never once met Vikram's eyes. His lawyer tried to argue that the plan for the attack had arisen spontaneously and without prior conspiracy. But all participant testimonies contradicted that tale. The investigator in charge, Inspector Gaurav Mehta, a man in his early 50s with gray at the temples, worked methodically and thoroughly. He reconstructed the entire chain from the cash-in-transit robbery in 1997 to the attack on Vikram's house. In the archives, he found an old case file concerning the Mahadev grouping. There were photographs of all members, including a young Chaurasia. Back then, he had been 23, lean and hard. Mehta questioned witnesses from that old case, including the driver of the cash van who had survived after being wounded. The man confirmed that there had been 3 attackers, all masked, and that one had commanded the others. He remembered the voice. After listening to Chaurasia's interrogation recording, he nodded. It sounded like the same leader. A voice analysis reported about 70% similarity, sufficient as a supporting clue. The technical diamonds were examined by specialists at the National Institute of Diamond Research in Surat. They confirmed that the stones were of high-frequency industrial grade, typical of production from Indian factories of the 90s, and that their characteristics matched a batch reported stolen in that 1997 case. The value in those days had been about $200,000. At present, roughly $5 million. Owing to currency changes and scarcity of quality technical diamonds, Mehta also learned how Mahadev had chosen the hiding place. It turned out his distant maternal aunt had once lived in that same village, on the lane next to Shamlal Iyer's house. Mahadev had visited her in the summer of 1998, shortly before his death. Evidently, he had buried the sphere then, under cover of night. He had selected Shamlal's plot because the orchard there was dense, convenient for digging unseen. The aunt died a year later. Never knowing about the cache, Shamlal was summoned for questioning. The elderly man arrived from the city with his daughter. Bewildered by the events, he insisted he knew nothing about any buried diamonds. He explained that he had received the plot back in the 70s from the cooperative, had built a house, and grown an orchard. The old apple tree had indeed stood where Vikram later dug the pit for the shed. He had cut the tree down 2 years earlier and pulled out the stump. He did not know Mahadev by face. Perhaps he had seen him visiting the aunt, but he had paid no attention. Mehta cross-checked Shamlal's statements with the neighbors. Everything matched, and the old man was released with an apology for the inconvenience. Parallel to this, the investigation dealt with members of Chaurasia's group. Lysode and Ribakar were charged with organizing the assault, illegal possession of weapons, and attempted murder. Kewale, who had given full statements, hoped for leniency. The other detainees tried to bargain for relief by shifting blame onto Chaurasia, but the investigators were unsparing. They had joined voluntarily and had been paid for their work, and would bear full responsibility. The man killed during the attack turned out to be Maxim Voronin, 37, thrice convicted earlier. For robbery and violent theft, his relatives buried him quietly, without talk. Investigators spoke to his mother. She wept and said her son had fallen in with a bad lot after his last release and had ignored her advice. Mehta recorded her words and expressed sympathy. But the law was the law. The son had taken part in an armed assault and had met his fate. A few times, relatives of the convicted tried to intimidate Vikram, calling his phone and sending threats on social media. Vikram informed the colonel, who had the calls traced. They turned out to be friends of Ribakar, seeking revenge for their jailed companion. They were summoned to the headquarters and warned in firm terms that threatening a witness brought real prison time. The calls ceased immediately. About 6 weeks after Chaurasia's arrest, Mehta completed the investigation and sent the file to the prosecution. The prosecutor studied the material for a week and approved the indictment. The matter was sent to the Sessions Court, with a hearing scheduled for mid-June. Vikram was told he would be called as the principal witness and would need to testify. He agreed. He understood it was necessary. Life gradually slipped back into its usual rhythm. Vikram finished the shed, completed the foundation, raised the walls, and roofed with sheets. Work helped keep the dark memories at bay. Leela managed the household. Ananya continued at school and received a certificate for excellence in mathematics. Neighbors asked what had happened. Vikram answered briefly. A criminal affair. It ended well. He gave no details. He did not wish to turn what they had endured into village gossip. Vikram reached the Sessions Court half an hour before the start. passed through the metal detector and climbed to the third floor. The courtroom was spacious, with high ceilings and long windows. On the bench sat Justice Ira Venkataraman, face stern, eyes attentive. The accused were brought in under escort Chauresha, Lai Sod, Libika, Kwale, and 3 other participants in the assault. All wore handcuffs. Guards stood on both sides. Chaurasia looked gaunt, thinner after the months of inquiry. His cheeks had sunk. He sat on the defendant's bench and stared at the floor. The lawyers settled next to them. Each accused had his own counsel, 6 in all, wearing dark suits. Public prosecutor Satyanarayan Mahadev, a man around 40 with a neat beard, read out the indictment in an even dot. Precise voice sections on criminal conspiracy, dacoity, illegal arms possession, and attempted murder with aggravating circumstances. He sought 18 years of rigorous imprisonment for Chauresha and 8 to 15 for the others, depending on their roles. The judge listened, nodded, and the examination of the accused began. Chauresha admitted guilt in part, yes. He had organized the search for the diamonds and gathered the men. But he had never ordered anyone to kill, only to frighten and take the stones. The prosecutor countered sharply. Combat-grade weapons and petrol bombs had been used in the attack, an obvious intent to cause grievous harm. Chauresha remained silent. The defense tried to object, but the judge raised a hand. These arguments would be weighed at sentencing. Vikram was called as a witness. He stepped to the stand and affirmed he would speak the truth. The prosecutor questioned him methodically. How had he found the sphere? What did he do when he noticed surveillance? How exactly had the events unfolded? Vikram answered calmly, and without dramatics he laid out facts. Described both assaults, the shots, and the threats to his family. The judge asked why he had not gone straight to the police after finding the stones, why he had called in an armed team for protection, and whether his response during the firefight had exceeded necessary self-defense. Vikram answered firmly. He had not gone to the police at once because he had first wished to confirm that the stones were indeed diamonds. He had called his friend from the special unit only when a real threat to life had emerged, and the defense had been proportionate to the attack. The prosecutor supported Vikram's account with documents, police reports after each incident, site inspection protocols, and expert conclusions. The next witness was Colonel Inderjit Singh. He confirmed that Vikram had acted lawfully in protecting himself and his property. The Special Forces team had arrived on an official request and had acted strictly within the law. The judge asked one clarifying question. Had there been any possibility to detain the attackers without using firearms? The colonel replied in the negative. The perpetrators were armed, opened fire first, and threatened to burn the house. There had been no other way to stop them. The wounded Kwale was then examined. His leg still hurt after the bullet wound, and he testified in a seated position. He explained how Chauresha had recruited men with promises of big money after selling the diamonds, and how the plan was to approach Vikram first with a token offer, if refused, to seize the stones by force. He had taken part in the second attack and had fired on Chauresha's orders. Now he repented and sought consideration for his full confession and cooperation. The judge declared a 1-hour recess. Vikram stepped into the corridor and drank water from the cooler and sat on a bench. The colonel stood by the window, lit a cigarette, and said the case was going well. The evidence was sufficient. The sentence would be severe. Vikram nodded and looked out over the summer city cars passing. People hurrying about. Ordinary life continued. The ballistics expert confirmed that the attackers' weapons were combat grade and illegally held. The diamond expert repeated that the stones matched exactly the batch stolen in 1997. The defense challenged the expert reports as insufficient and demanded repeat examinations. The judge refused. The analyses had been conducted by authoritative specialists according to standard methods. There was no basis for doubt. The hearing ran till evening. The judge announced that final arguments would occur in 3 days, by which time all documents would be fully reviewed. The convoy led the accused back to the lockup. Vikram returned home late, tired from the strain. At home, Leela met him with dinner but did not question him. She understood he needed rest. 3 days later, Vikram came again. The prosecutor delivered a forceful closing, detailing every episode of Chauresia's criminal enterprise and demanding the maximum punishment 18 years for Chauresia and 8 to 15 for the others. The defense pleaded for leniency, citing confessions, dependence, and favorable references. The judge heard both sides and retired to chambers. The judgment was announced the next day. The hall was full relatives of the accused, journalists, and the merely curious. The judge read for 40 minutes, justifying each figure in detail. Chauresia received 17 years of rigorous imprisonment. Lysode got 14, Ribikar 12, the rest between 8 and 11. Kewali's term was reduced to 7 for his cooperation. All were barred from holding certain posts and faced confiscation of property toward compensation for damages. Chauresia listened without expression and instructed his lawyer to appeal. Vikram knew an appeal was unlikely to change anything. The evidence was too strong. He left the hall. Reporters asked, "How do you feel about the verdict? Are you satisfied?" "Justice has prevailed. Now we can live in peace." He declined extended interviews, got into his vehicle, and drove away. Summer passed in ordinary work. Vikram finished the shed completely, painted the walls, hung new gates, sowed late vegetables, cabbage, beetroot, carrots, and repaired the old fence around the boundary, replacing rotten planks with fresh ones. Physical labor helped drive away the recent echoes of gunfire and fear. Ananya completed 7th standard with a merit certificate and received awards in mathematics and Hindi. Vikram and Leela went to the city and bought her a new bicycle as a reward. Ananya rode along the village lanes with her friends, laughing merrily, not really knowing what her parents had been through. By spring, the neighbors gradually stopped asking about the criminal affair. At first, everyone was curious, passing along stories embroidered with additions and distortions. Vikram answered dryly and without detail, and curiosity faded on its own. The village lived its life cutting hay, picking berries in the forest, preparing for the haymaking season. In August, Suresh Chauhan visited with his family. He brought his wife Asha and their son Deepu, a lively, inquisitive boy of about 12. They set up a barbecue in the yard, sat late by the embers, and reminisced about army years. Suresh asked about the trial. Vikram recounted briefly. Suresh nodded and clapped him on the shoulder. "Well done for standing your ground. You did not flinch." Vikram only shrugged. What else was there to do? He had protected his family. Deepu and Ananya became friends quickly, ran through the garden, climbed the old pear tree, and played with their dog. Leela and Asha sat on the veranda, drank tea with jam, and spoke of household matters. In September, the colonel rang to say that Chauresia's appeal had been rejected. The verdict had entered into force. Chauresia was transferred to Yerwada Central Prison under a strict regime wing, and the others were distributed across different institutions. The case was officially closed. The material evidence was handed over to the state. Vikram's reward of 250,000 rupees was sanctioned for his assistance. The money would be credited within a month. Vikram thanked the colonel for the update. The funds arrived in 3 weeks. Vikram withdrew them and brought the cash home. Leela asked what they should do with it. Vikram thought and proposed 1 lakh to be kept aside for Ananya's education when she entered college. 1 lakh for house repairs, patch the roof and change the windows. The remainder to be invested into the farm, buy a second cow and expand the work. Leela agreed. It was a sensible plan. Village life flowed steadily. Vikram delivered milk to the procurement point at the Tehsil town and sold surplus vegetables at the Saturday market, saving slowly. Leela tended the large kitchen garden, did winter preserves, and baked bread in the old oven. Ananya studied diligently and dreamed of joining a teacher's training college after 11th to become a mathematics teacher. In winter, Vikram insulated the house, replaced old frames with plastic windows, and repaired the stove. He hired a stove mason from the next village, who dismantled the brickwork and laid it anew so that the warmth held better. Their faithful dog had grown old, ran less, and lay more by the kennel. Vikram bought him a warm wooden house with bedding. The animal looked up with grateful eyes. In the spring of the next year, Vikram began building a large greenhouse, planning to grow saplings for sale. He bought polycarbonate sheets and a metal frame and assembled the structure in 2 weeks. The structure turned out solid and neat. There was plenty of light, so seeds could be started early. Leela was delighted. She said that this year early cucumbers and tomatoes would reach the table already by May. Ananya had grown taller and steadier, helped with the household willingly, milked the cow without complaint, studied well, and kept bringing home top marks. The teachers praised her. Vikram felt proud of his daughter and understood that she was becoming a hardworking child, unspoiled by city comforts. At times he recalled that spring when he dug the pit for the shed and struck the iron sphere. He remembered the fear for his family, the sleepless nights with the gun at hand, the crash of shots in the yard. But all that had receded. Life had moved forward. The diamonds had gone to the state. The criminals were serving their terms. Justice had prevailed. And the Soren family lived peacefully in their village, building up the farm and planning for the future. Suresh phoned once a month, asked after their welfare, and promised to come again with his family in summer. Vikram always invited him, saying they were forever welcome. Friendship tested by fire and blood does not rust with time. Their old dog, Sheru, passed away at the end of May. Quietly, in his sleep, Vikram buried him in the far corner of the garden under the old pear tree and set up a small wooden cross. Ananya wept, and Leela wiped her tears. A week later, Vikram brought home a puppy from the city, a reddish mongrel with bright, intelligent eyes. They named him Bola. The pup grew quickly, settled in soon enough, and ran around the yard, tail wagging. Life went on, ordinary village life, with its chores and its simple joys. The iron sphere with its diamonds remained in the past, a strange episode that had sharply altered their fate, yet had not broken the family. Vikram learnt to value simple things. A quiet evening on the veranda, in his daughter's laughter, the warm touch of his wife's hand. Everything else proved unimportant. About a year after the trial, a call came from an unfamiliar number. An elderly male voice, a little hoarse, introduced himself, Ishwar Prasad Mahadevan, brother of that very Anant Mahadevan, known by the moniker Mahadev. Vikram grew alert but listened. Ishwar Prasad explained that he lived in Thane and worked as a fitter at a factory. He had never been involved in crime. They agreed to meet in the Tehsil town, at a cafe on the central square. A week later, on a Saturday, Ishwar Prasad turned out to be a short, lean man of about 60, with graying hair and a tired face. They shook hands and sat at a window table. The waitress brought tea, and for a minute they sat in silence. Then Ishwar Prasad began to speak softly, as if telling the story to himself. Anant had been the younger brother, younger by 8 years. He grew up an ordinary boy, an average student, played football, and dreamt of becoming a driver. After school, he joined the army, served in the Armored Corps, and returned in '89. He got a job as a driver with the motor pool, married, and a daughter was born. They lived modestly but all right. Then the '90s began. The factory stalled. Salaries went unpaid for months. Anant did whatever he could, took private fare jobs, hauled goods. He fell in with doubtful people and started moving contraband. Ishwar Prasad tried to dissuade him. But the brother did not listen. The family must be fed, he would say. Then he got drawn in deeper. Robberies started, and gang clashes followed. His wife left with the daughter. She could not bear it. Anand grew bitter and finally gathered a gang. Ishwar Prasad saw him for the last time in '98. In summer, Anand arrived battered, with a knife wound to the side. He said enemies had found him, and his days were numbered. He asked that a message be passed to his daughter that he had loved her and begged forgiveness. A vague later, he died in hospital. The girl had been 10 then. Now she was 36. She lived in Delhi, was married, and had 2 children. She did not want to hear about her father. She was ashamed of the past. Ishwar Prasad took out an old photograph. Anand holding his little girl, about 2 years old. Both were smiling. Vikram looked at the picture silently and saw an ordinary man, not a poster villain. He understood that life is more complicated than it seems, and that no one is born a criminal. Ishwar Prasad asked quietly, "Those diamonds you found, were they truly worth so much? Worth a life?" Vikram saw him off and then sat alone for a while. At home, he told Leela about the meeting. She listened, shook her head, and said she felt sorry for everyone, their families, and Mahadevan's daughter, who had grown up without a father. Vikram agreed but added that pity does not cancel responsibility for one's deeds. Mahadevan had chosen the criminal path and had paid for that choice. The circle had closed only after 20 years, yet it had closed inevitably. Over dinner, Ananya asked what the talk with the unfamiliar uncle had been about. Vikram explained briefly. A relative of the man who had buried the diamonds had wanted to tell the story. Ananya thought for a moment and asked, "If Papa had not found the sphere, would we have lived peacefully?" Vikram smiled sadly. "Perhaps. Yes. But we were not meant to know. Fate decided otherwise." In the evening, he stepped into the yard and stood by the spot where he had dug the pit for the shed 2 years earlier. The shed stood firm and well-painted, serving faithfully. It was hard to believe that a hoard worth millions had lain underground there. The iron sphere had long been in the evidence vault, the diamonds handed to the state. The story had ended, but the mark remained forever in his memory. Bola trotted up and nudged his leg. Vikram crouched and scratched the dog behind the ear. Life goes on. One must value every day and every peaceful evening with family. The rest does not matter. He went back inside. In the kitchen, Leela was laying the table for dinner. Ananya bent over her notebook, doing her homework. An ordinary evening scene, something Vikram had learnt to treasure above all else after the fear of almost losing his loved ones. In the winter of the 3rd year, after Chauresia's arrest, Colonel Inderjit Singh called Vikram with unexpected news. Chauresia had fallen gravely ill in prison, stage 3 lung cancer. The doctors gave him only a few months. He had filed a petition for mercy on medical grounds. He wished to die outside the walls. The committee was reviewing it. Vikram finally asked, "What does Chauresia himself write?" The colonel relayed. He repented, sought forgiveness from all who had suffered, and wanted to see his mother before the end. The old woman was 83 and might not live to see her son freed. Vikram asked for time to think. The colonel gave him a week. Vikram put the phone down and sat at the kitchen table, lost in thought. Leela asked what had happened. She listened carefully and then said, "To see that for yourself. I will support whatever you choose. It is your right. You bore the most." Vikram weighed the arguments for several days. On one side, Chauresia had organized the attack and threatened his family. A man had died because of him. On the other side, a man was dying and wanted to spend his last days with his mother. Vengeance or mercy, which was right? He discussed it with Ananya, his daughter. Now, a senior student, reasoned with maturity. She said forgiveness did not mean forgetting. Chauresia had answered for the crime and had already served 3 years. Nothing could erase that. If he was dying, let him be at home among his own. Revenge upon the dying was senseless. Vikram listened to his daughter and marveled at her young wisdom. A week later, he phoned the colonel and conveyed his decision. He did not object to Chauraja's early release on medical grounds. The colonel thanked him for his humanity and said the committee would take his opinion into account. A month later, Chauraja was released to his mother's care. He returned to his native city and lay at home under doctor's supervision. He died about 2 months later, in April. His mother buried him in the city cemetery. Prayers were offered at the temple. Vikram learnt of it from a short notice in the district newspaper. He did not go to the funeral. He did not consider it necessary. The circle closed completely. The story was finished. Spring came early and warm. Vikram worked in the greenhouse, planting tomato and pepper saplings. They bought a second cow. There was more milk, and the surplus was sold to neighbors. Suresh visited in summer with his family. They sat by the fire and grilled kebabs. Deepu grew up and joined the army, serving in the airborne forces. Suresh was proud of his son and showed photographs of him in a sky blue beret. Vikram remembered his own service and felt that life moved in circles. Children often walk in their father's tracks. Ananya finished school with a gold medal and entered the teachers' college in Nagpur on a merit seat, choosing the mathematics department. Vikram and Leela were proud and helped with money for her rented room. They sent care packages once a month. Ananya studied diligently and did her practicum at a school. The children liked her. In the autumn, Vikram received a letter from old Mrs. Mahadevan, Chauraja's mother. She thanked him for not opposing her son's release and for allowing him to die at home. She wrote that she understood Vikram's pain, begged forgiveness for what her son had done, and prayed for all who had suffered and for the repose of the dead. Vikram read the letter, folded it, and put it away in a drawer. He did not write back, but he kept no anger. The old woman was not responsible for her son's choices. In winter, Vikram built a new bathhouse. The old one had become shabby. He hired a small crew. In a month, they put up a sturdy structure of pine beams, ran water, and installed an iron stove. They fired it for the first time as a family when Ananya came home for the weekend. They sat in the steam room, poured water on the hot stones, and enjoyed the heat. Afterwards, they drank tea with honey on the veranda, wrapped in robes. Simple family happiness, something no diamonds could ever buy. 5 years passed. Since the day Vikram dug up the iron sphere, life had slipped into a calm rhythm. The events of those months felt like a distant dream. The Soren farm had grown. There were now 3 cows, 20 hens, and a large vegetable plot with greenhouses. Vikram delivered milk and vegetables. Ananya made friends with a young man from a nearby village, Alok, an agronomist at the local farm. They met for about a year. On New Year's, Alok proposed, and Ananya agreed. The wedding was set for summer. Vikram and Leela prepared thoroughly. They repaired the house, painted the fence, and put the yard in order. Leela stitched curtains and bed covers and embroidered traditional runners. Vikram built a new gazebo and set a long table for guests. They worked with joy, preparing a worthy celebration for their daughter. The wedding was held in July. Relatives and friends were invited. Suresh came with his family. Deepu, having completed his service and entered a military academy, joined them. The family cooked for 3 days. The tables were laid in the gazebo, and the celebration went on till morning songs to the harmonium and dancing on the grass. Alok proved to be a good man, hard-working and serious. Vikram blessed the young couple, feeling that his daughter was in reliable hands. The newlyweds settled in Alok's home in the neighboring village, about 10 kilometers from the parents. Vikram and Leela visited every week, brought provisions, and helped with chores. A year later, a grandson, Ishan, was born, a healthy, sturdy boy. Vikram took him in his arms at the hospital, looked at the tiny, wrinkled face, and felt warmth spread through his chest. He had become a grandfather. It was a new role in life. Ishan grew fast. By 2, he was already running around the yard, helping his grandfather feed the hens and patting Bola. Vikram spent hours with the boy, teaching him to recognize plants in the garden and showing how the tractor worked. Leela baked pies for her grandson and knitted warm socks and sweaters. Ananya and Alok built their life, worked, and saved for expanding the house. The village changed slowly, but noticeably gas lines were laid to the homes. The main street was asphalted, and a new children's playground was built. Some of the youth moved away to the cities. One summer, a journalist from the district paper came to Vikram asking for an interview about the diamonds, preparing a feature on 90s crime and its aftershocks. Vikram agreed reluctantly. He did not like stirring the past. He answered briefly and without extra emotion. The journalist took notes and photographed the house and yard. The article came out a month later. Vikram barely recognized himself. She had polished the story and added drama. He chose not to object. Let them write what they wished. After publication, several people called, introduced themselves as reporters and bloggers, and requested interviews for television and the internet. Vikram declined all of them, explaining that he did not want to make a show from a tragedy. The story had ended. There was no reason to exploit it. The calls stopped within a week. Suresh retired after 25 years of service and moved with his family to a village near Nagpur. He bought a small house with land and often phoned Vikram, sharing plans. He would start a bee farm and extract honey. Vikram offered advice and also thought about keeping bees, though he lacked the time for now. Bola grew old, turned lazier, and lay more often on the veranda. Vikram stroked the dog's graying muzzle and remembered Sheru. Dogs live faster than humans. They manage to give loyalty and then leave, leaving behind gentle memories. Bola still served faithfully, but the years took their toll. Vikram marked his 50th birthday within the family circle. Ananya and Alok came with Ishan. They laid a table and gifted Vikram a fine tool set for the workshop. Leela baked a cake. The grandson blew out the candles in place of his grandfather, and everyone laughed. Suresh sent greetings by messenger and promised to visit in summer. Vikram sat at the table, looked at his dear ones, and understood that he had not lived in vain. He had protected his family, raised his daughter, and lived to see his grandson. The rest did not matter. 10 years had passed since the iron find. Alok was promoted and became the chief agronomist of the block. The young family lived with dignity. Vikram handed part of the farm to Alok and kept to the greenhouses and a small plot. His strength was not what it had been. His back ached after heavy work. Leela knitted for the grandchildren, bucket piece, and looked after Misha, the younger granddaughter. When Ananya was at work, life moved evenly, without upheaval. Suresh came every summer and brought honey from his apiary. They sat on the veranda long into the evenings, recalling the army, the years of service, and that spring when they had defended the house against Chauraja's gang. Suresh would say it had been the last real fight of his life. Only drills and training. Vikram nodded. For him, too, those days remained among the brightest. Though frightening, Deepu, Suresh's son, became an officer, served in the airborne, commanded a company, married, and had a daughter. Suresh proudly showed photographs of the little granddaughter. Vikram rejoiced for his friend. Life continued. New generations grew, and everything went its course. In the village, a small museum of local history opened in the old school building. They collected exhibits, documents, and photographs. The museum director, a young history teacher named Vera Nikhil, asked Vikram to contribute any materials about the diamond story. Vikram agreed, handing over copies of newspaper articles, a photograph of the spot where he had dug the pit, and a short factual note. Vera prepared a display and titled it The Criminal Tale of the 90s. Vikram attended the opening, looked it over, and nodded. Memory matters so that the young may know what those times were like. Ishan often asked his grandfather about the diamonds and begged for a detailed telling. Vikram obliged, but without extra drama. Explaining the essentials: protect your family, value your loved ones, and never chase easy money. Ishan listened carefully and remembered. Vikram hoped the boy would grow into a decent man and not repeat others' mistakes. As for Bola, faithful friends, guard the house and family, and earn gentle remembrance. Ananya suggested getting a new puppy, but Vikram refused. He no longer had the energy to train another dog. Let them live quietly. In the autumn, Vikram and Leela visited a monastery in the neighboring state and lit candles for all who had perished in that story: for Voronin, killed in the assault; for Chauresha, and for Mahadevan. Leela prayed for a long time, whispering about forgiveness and peace for souls. Vikram stood beside her and thought about how thin the line is between life and death, and how easily everything might have ended differently. In winter, Vikram was invited to join the District Veterans Council. He agreed and helped organize meetings with the young, speaking about army service and the value of peaceful living. The youngsters listened politely, some with interest, others with boredom. Vikram did not take offense. He understood that every generation learns from its own mistakes. Ananya received the title of Teacher of the Year in the district and was awarded a certificate and a cash prize. Vikram and Leela sat proudly in the audience at the ceremony. Afterwards, Ananya said she would give half the prize to her parents. They refused; it was needed for her own family. And the children were growing. Ananya insisted and bought her parents a new television. The old one had worn out. In spring, Vikram turned over the soil one last time at the spot where he had once found the sphere. The shed stood strong and true. He paused, leaned on his spade, and looked at that place. 10 years earlier, life had changed sharply because of a chance find. Yet the family had stood firm, survived, and grown stronger. The diamonds were gone. The criminals had answered for their deeds. Justice had prevailed, and the Sorens lived in peace, raised grandchildren, and built the future. In the evening, he and Leela sat on the veranda and drank tea. The sun sank behind the trees. The red sky, promising fair weather for tomorrow. Leela took her husband's hand and said softly, "It is good that everything ended well. It is frightening to remember those days." Ishan ran into the yard with a toy sword, calling his grandfather to play. Vikram smiled, rose, and went to the boy. Life goes on. It holds room for joy and labor, for worries and hopes. The iron sphere with its diamonds remained in the past as a lesson. True wealth lies not in stones, but in the love of one's close ones and in the quiet happiness of peaceful days.